Welcome to Economics Happy Hour. My name's Matt,
And my name is Jadrian.
and we are excited to be coming to you on Thanksgiving week. When this drops, we haven't figured it out yet, whether it's Thanksgiving Day or whether we're dropping it beforehand. But we are recording it the week before, in the thick of everything. So everything good, new, exciting in your world?
Exciting, yes. New. I always have new stuff. There's always something new. I'm getting to
Oh,
do something in the spring that I've never done before, so
okay.
that could be fun. It could not, might not be. Um,
What can you share, or is
yeah, of
that?
course. Yeah. I've been invited to do a program review of an internal program, though, not an external program.
Okay.
So I believe it's our accounting department. They need people to review the accounting department and make sure that they're doing everything correctly. And I checked with we're not in the college of business, so I checked with my college of just like, is this something I should? Am I expected to do this? Can I say no? And our department was largely, this would look really good on your promotion.
Okay. Very cool.
So
Very cool.
I will be doing that, but it's in the spring, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Current Jadrian doesn't have to worry.
That's future problem. So nice.
Exactly.
Nice.
So when you talk to me in March or April of 2025 and I go, Matt, I'm drowning in accounting,
That's funny.
you can flashback to this moment.
That's funny. And we are still recording this before Southerns, but you will be off to Southerns in a couple days. When people listen to this,
Yeah.
Jadrian, he had a
I'll be
great
back.
time at Southerns.
I had a
He
great
it was
time.
fantastic, and he was thrilled to meet you. For those who
I
are
am
listening
I
who
am
were there.
I am shocked. Multiple people, it was to be fair, it's two so far, but it's still concerning. Multiple people have brought up how much I'm doing at the Southerns. They're like, "Oh, you're on the program a lot," and I'm just sitting there going, "I am," because I don't think I am. And so the question for me really is, am I doing more than I realize I'm doing, or have I forgotten something that I'm
Oh,
supposed to be doing? So I'll be doing that after this conversation. I'll be looking to see
after
just how
you will
busy
be
I'm supposed to be.
looking up the program. That will be funny. No, that's good. So it looks like you are in the office. So
I am in the
what is the
office.
beverage of choice?
Okay, so I'm in the office. Did not go with the Diet Coke. Did not even go with a soda. I don't know. It's feeling a little different. We have a dining hall that just opened two buildings down. So
Okay.
really exciting because the previous one was five buildings down and just far enough away that I didn't want to go to it.
That's three whole buildings. I mean,
Exactly. Well, yeah, and you know this better than anyone. Fewer dining options means all those students are packed at one location. So new dining hall is just two buildings down, almost always super empty. But I have a cucumber watermelon refresher. I don't know what it is, but it's pink.
okay.
So I think it's sort of a cucumber watermelon water juice type thing.
I might have been in last time when we talked. I was in Solidarity. I had a non-alcoholic drink. I didn't know you were going to be at the office, so I did grab a alcoholic beer, the Hopora, Trogs Hopora.
Man, I miss Trogs.
Trogs makes Perpetual IPA as one of their most famous IPAs, but this is an IPA. It says it's the fall hop cycle, whatever that means. So,
Trogs has a cool brewery. Have you been?
I don't think I have been to that one.
It's right down the street from you. I'm gonna call it right down the street. It's in Hershey.
Yeah,
Did
it's
you
not
know?
that far. I
Yeah.
think. I lose track of which one's in Hershey, which one's in Harrisburg, which one's in Philly, which one's in Williamsport between the various breweries. But we do have some nice. We have lots of good IPA options.
You are only 1 hour away from the Trogs Brewery,
Okay, nice.
which I feel like they have a lot of IPAs. That feels right up your alley. And you do fly from Harrisburg every now and then.
So just get on the plane after having several beers at the Trogs, or after the flight. I'll need to relax. Yeah, I'll need to relax. That's good. That's good. So
Keep that in your back pocket.
yeah, it's a good idea. It's a good idea. And I have my beer in a glass of a place you just visited, Hard Rock Cafe in New Orleans. Well, I don't know that you visited Hard Rock Cafe. You probably
No, I visited New Orleans. I did not visit.
Yeah, our family. When we would do family trips when the kids were a lot younger, they loved going to Hard Rock Cafe. So
They just
they
like all
didn't need the
they like all
shirt.
the stuff on the wall.
Yeah, they didn't need the shirts, but it's good food. And even when we were abroad, and the kids are small, like
Yeah.
the idea of it's kind of American food and a good,
Yeah.
a burger or tender.
It's
So,
funny. No, I eat McDonald's when I go abroad. I love it. I like
Yeah.
to see the differences.
yeah, it's good stuff. It's good
I
stuff.
like it.
So today we didn't do much prep. Our prep usually consists of a text message back or forth, and that's what it consisted of today. And the topic today, the question that I get to ask, I get to interview Jadrian a little bit here, but what was your favorite topic to teach this semester?
Yeah, this is interesting. I think I interviewed you a couple episodes back,
Yeah.
so I think we get to switch it.
Yes.
This week I am teaching. So last in my big class, I taught it last week. This week I'm teaching in my small class, so they're not exactly lined up, but they're really close. But I am teaching pricing strategies, which I think has a fancier title than it's really price discrimination is what we're talking about. But for whatever reason, the books like to call it pricing strategies. The only strategy we really talk about is price discrimination. But for those of you who don't know what that is, we'll start broadly. Pricing strategy is sort of, I like to say, creative ways of selling a product in order to get more profit. So it's things like, why do some companies 99 cents versus the whole dollar? Two-part tariffs, which is my favorite. That's one thing I'm going to talk about today. And then price discrimination, just charging different people different prices for the exact same product. So that's what I talked about. And I can go deeper unless you have, I can start with top level questions.
Well, you were pretty excited about the topic. So you taught that yesterday or today already, or is
Yeah,
that
so
tomorrow?
I'm gonna pick on my small class because I get to do more. My big class is a very traditional lecture. I go through some practice questions together, but largely it's me lecturing. They'll answer some clicker questions. My small class is much more like a flipped classroom. And so we're actually working on problems together. We get to kind of, you get to go a little bit deeper. You get to sort of say, here's the question, but I could have asked you this. Versus in the big class, it's sort of like, here's the question, here's how it's going to be on the homework. Let's go to the next topic.
Yeah.
So I sort of did a review yesterday, and then in the small class, I'm starting to do the deeper stuff that I love to do.
So part of backing up a bit, part of what's always interesting about the getting into pricing strategies is first you're in a market it could be somewhat competitive, but it's certainly not matching the perfect competition guidelines because there is the ability to charge different prices and not much really fully hits perfect competition.
Yeah.
But there is the ability to set different prices for different products, but that within the same industry. And so you're talking about pricing strategies. Do you have industries you're focusing on?
No, we do it more as just general ideas. So
Okay.
I love talking about it. So this moment in the course, and I think Matt, this is where you get really lucky because when you teach, you get 4 credits. So you probably get to go way deeper than I do. So we just had our first exam last week, and usually the way I tell students leading up to exam 3 is the way I call it those were the principles. Like when it's called principles of microeconomics, and I say those were really the principles. What is the principle of a perfectly competitive market? What is the idea of a monopoly? And I have like a conversation with them about the stuff that we'd previously learned. You don't usually see in the real world. Like it's harder to see those things. But then I talk about like it's important to understand it because we care about markets moving towards a monopoly or towards something else. But this moment, the last 3 weeks of the class, I call it the applications of economics. And so I actually get to show them sort of like, this is the real life example. And so like, I think a really good example is like in the market structure, we always talk about the law of one price, or firms are picking a single price. And then I get to sort of shatter it and go, that's not real. Firms don't charge just one price. Like that doesn't make sense. And I kind of tell them like, that doesn't make sense. And so it's really fun to sort of get to talk to them about sort of real life economics.
Yeah.
I love, I talk about movie theaters, right? I talk about, so tuition's really cool here because the business students have to pay more than other students, engineers pay more. So we have differential tuition based on what your major is, regardless of what courses you're taking. So even if you're all in the same courses, you might pay more as a different major.
But you are getting a different product.
Eventually you are.
Eventually you are. Yeah, if you make it through.
Yeah.
If you don't make it through, it was the same one. It's interesting thinking about movies. Movies hit so many of these different things because there's the matinee pricing versus the evening pricing, and then the student pricing versus the adult pricing, which is classic price discrimination.
Yeah.
That seat costs the same amount for the theater, and they will charge different people different prices based on their willingness to pay. But then they have a different form of price discrimination at a lot of the major chains.
So they're picking your seats, right?
Well, there's picking seats, but
Yeah.
on top of that, actually my son picked out he has the AMC Stubs
Yeah.
A list, so spends $20 a month, and you get to go to you get up to
Mhm.
3 movies per week for that $20 a month, and if the break even point kind of depends what area you're in. If you're in Selinsgrove and the prices they charge, and you would see matinees, it probably is 4 a month. If
Yeah.
you're in Philadelphia where he is, it's probably 2 a month, quite frankly, because the prices are a little bit higher. So, if he averages a movie a week and he loves interesting, unique movies too, that's
Yeah.
but
No.
that's a pricing strategy where you
Yeah.
try to lock people in, and they have economists trying to figure out that, okay, why would they offer this? I
Mhm.
mean, do they lose money versus just having somebody buy the tickets over and over? Um, Maybe, although you say lose money, they have competitors. So if they don't
Yeah.
offer this and somebody else offers it, they could lose out to the competitors. But by offering this, he'll be going to this theater. They get the guaranteed revenue each week. He might buy popcorn or a soda from time
Mhm.
to time. So it's a
Might
different
bring a
way of running.
friend, right? You
Yep,
say, I don't want to go to the movie by myself. Let me tag somebody
correct.
along. They'll pay a full price. You get the discounted price. No,
Yes.
that's why I get so excited to teach this part because I have these great pictures that I find online. There's one that I found on Twitter. It's years old. It was a football game. It was the Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State football game, and somebody was charging their parking spots. If you were an Oklahoma fan, it was $20. If you were an Oklahoma State, it was 25. And so I get
That's
to
pretty
talk
fun.
about like they're easily identifiable groups, right? Somebody's going to show up in one color or the other. You have the ability to sell that product, and it's a fun topic. I think like it's just really fun to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree. I would agree. So that will be interesting. Did you have when we talked briefly beforehand, you mentioned that it's been a
Yes.
fun semester and there was perhaps some other topics you really enjoyed this semester, or
No,
maybe
so
on a
no, I'm gonna pick on this one. I did something new in this class that I've never taught before. This is my small class, not the big class. Um, there are certain, and I don't know if you've had this moment before, and maybe this is a future episode that we could talk about things where when I first started teaching, there were things that I memorized as a student, and
yeah.
even in the teaching moment, I memorized it, and I was like, here's where dead weight loss is. And I never had to actually explain it
Okay.
right until a student asked me, and I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
I don't know how to explain this at an entry level to somebody." And so that has happened leading up until this semester. I finally got to do something. So one of the things historically I've always taught in my classes is that in the price discrimination section, I sort of show them graphically charging two prices is better than charging one. And so, right, I show them graphically like here's the monopoly price and look at all this dead weight loss. And, I'm not using real numbers. I'm just sort of kind of coloring it in by concepts. And then I would always say, like, what if we could charge a second price at this lower one? And like, I'm just picking random parts on the graph. And so I say things like, this batch is now profit and dead weight loss shrinks.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've always talked about conceptually. I've never actually done the math to show them that it
Okay.
works. And in my small class, I'm using a new book. So I'm trying out a new book. I wanted to see if a different platform would work for me. And the new book has price discrimination with the hurdle method. Have you heard of the hurdle method?
I've heard of it. Yeah,
Heard of it,
yeah.
right? I had never like
And
when
I think
I'm
I've seen it, but it's been so many years I can't tell you what it is
yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
So I had never actually seen it. It was really it's very interesting. It's essentially the hurdle part is that people have to go over a hurdle to get the discount. So you're charging one price, you give them a coupon that they have to turn in or a rebate. And so the goal of the hurdle method is basically like how big does the rebate or the coupon have to be in order for people to actually do it. So what you're really doing is figuring out the two price points, and then the difference between the two price points is the size of the coupon or the rebate or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And it was so exciting because in this flipped classroom, I have to prepare the worksheets that we work on together. And like I'm reading through the
Yeah.
book, and this is me being lazy. When I picked the book, I didn't check every chapter. I didn't check like I'm not
No, I
reading
mean
through it.
they're
I'm like
600 pages. You
I'm like
don't
it's principles. It's probably all the same.
well, and you'll read it eventually, but right,
I'll read it eventually.
you're not going to read 600 pages of
Right.
10 books to figure
Yes.
out which book you'll
Which
switch
one?
to.
I'm like, it talks about price discrimination. I'll get there.
Yeah.
And so I was it's the week to start doing it. So, I sit down, I go, well, what did my students read last week? And I'm reading through the price discrimination section and I go, oh man, I've never done this hurdle method before. I've been teaching for 10 years on price
Yeah.
discrimination.
Oh, very cool.
I've done two-part tariffs, which I love, and I could talk about that. I've done perfect price discrimination, but I've never done this sort of like, how do you actually pick the two prices? And so like I download one of the practice questions and I'm like working through it. And the entire time I'm working through it, I'm like, this is so cool. This is how you do it. Of course, this makes sense. And so I got this like really giddy moment where like I got to learn something that I conceptually know how to do, but I've never gotten to do like with a practice problem.
And I mean,
really excited.
For those, there are a lot of economists who listen to us. Those who are economists will know. I mean, at some point you got into economics, you enjoyed doing some of these problems. I mean, they were a lot of fun. They were new and they were different and they were puzzles and you figured it out. For those who are not academic economists, well,
we get really excited.
That's what we get. We get excited about it. It's all sorts of fun to think through these things.
No, it's fun, right? I think conceptually people understand this. I don't think I would have to imagine that if we asked a non-economist, somebody who's never taken an economics course, why does the movie theater charge a lower price? I feel very why do they charge a lower price for matinee? I feel very confident that they would say, well, if they charged a higher price, nobody would go. Nobody wants to go to the movies in the middle of the afternoon. So you have to lower the price to sell more tickets. I think, I always tell my students this, conceptually, I think economics is really easy. The nuances are like, well, how much money do they make? How do they decide the price? Right? Like those are the sort of,
sure.
That's what I think frustrates a lot of people when they take an economics course. But I think most people know economics. And so it was really fun to try to, I basically felt like I learned something I never got to learn before.
No, that's very, very cool. Yeah.
Matt, I do want to ask you a question though. Since you teach price discrimination when you teach principles.
Yes, it has been a few years, but yes.
So I have observed something in my discussion boards that I would like to pose to you to see if this is just something that I think is weird or if you have a good explanation for this. So I do discussion boards, and each week they have to talk about things that they find interesting, confusing, questions about the material. And one of the things I've noticed is that when I teach price discrimination, I don't call it, in the beginning, I don't call it price discrimination. I say, all of you have negative connotations with that. I go, think price differentiation, because we just spent time talking about product differentiation. I go, we're just charging different prices. And the way that I frame it, I always give them examples, essentially, of where they benefit from the lower prices. So I talk about, you get student discounts at the dining hall. I don't get those. You get student discounts at the movie theaters. I don't get those. I'm giving them examples in that match. I've noticed this year, and I've noticed in the past, the questions that my students ask is about whether it is unfair that people are charged different prices for products. And I find that I don't think they're wrong. I think that's a very valid question to ask. I always find it really interesting, mostly in the sense that they are usually the ones benefiting from the lower prices. I don't know of many examples where a student has to pay a higher price than somebody else. Unless you can think of one off the top of your head. I didn't pose this to you earlier. Can you think of like why that would be I could see that sort of curiosity from somebody who has to pay more. It's strange to hear that curiosity from people who sort of always have benefited from paying less for a product.
So that's a good question. So when you first mentioned it, I guess my first reaction, if a student asks this, I go, it's a good question. And that's honestly, it's beyond what anything you'll be tested on, because that's positive analysis versus normative analysis. So we're studying the what is, and the normative is the what ought to be. Should this happen is getting into value judgment. So people could have different values and different opinions within the class. Why are they doing it? Well, I mean, it won't be very long before they're not students anymore.
That's true.
And I mean, I think most people generally want to think about the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So
it's always interesting because I don't think of, and again, we'll go back to the normative side, right? The value judgment side. I don't ever think about, so I will say in class, I fake anger about it. I'm like, it's not fair that y'all get cheap tickets that I don't. But I think they can tell that I'm joking. I don't care that they get cheap tickets. And I don't generally think I don't value judgment wise. I
Yeah.
don't think most people care that we have student discounts. I feel like, oh, maybe I'm
No,
in a bubble here, right? Like maybe our listeners can help and be like, no, Jadrian, you're very
yeah.
wrong. This makes me so mad. I've never seen a student discount and actually gotten mad about it.
No,
Like,
um,
or like a senior discount, right? Or I get
well,
mad
yeah,
about
I think,
I get mad about some discounts, but like, I've never been like, that's not fair that my grandmother has to pay less. Like,
yeah, yeah. I don't know of people who've gotten upset. Well, you said this, I just Googled it, and the AI overview is interesting here. While
okay.
not everyone is upset about student discounts, some people, particularly those outside the student demographic, can feel frustrated about them, especially when they see student discounts as unfair price discrimination. Go Google's AI for throwing price discrimination in there. Of course, unfair being normative. We've got a
Yeah,
question.
but I'm
Where
but I
individuals with higher incomes are essentially subsidizing the lower prices for students with lower incomes. Well, if you're talking about most people's idea of fairness, right? Higher incomes do generally pay more in taxes and
yeah,
subsidize the
that's why I'm
more
so
with
curious.
lower.
Like I'm
So
curious. Like I guess theoretically, that's what I said. Theoretically, I understand the logic behind it.
yeah,
I just can't imagine that there are that many people who get discounts or who are mad about student discounts.
I wouldn't think so. I mean,
One of our
I
listeners
think,
is gonna be like, it drives me insane. Like
yeah,
we're
I'll
gonna
be
come up with
curious.
examples.
Please do comment if it drives you
I'm
insane. I would be
curious.
fascinated to hear. I mean, what are the least?
Well, I feel like the discount's not enough, right? I think about right, a movie discount's like $2. Like it would be different. I think I could get mad. If a student was paying like if I paid $30 for something they paid $2 for. So okay, to be fair, I actually do get a little mad about the student discounts on campus because they get 50% off when they use their dining card, like at
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A, for example.
Okay.
That I could put money on my dining card, but I don't get 50% off. So I'll
So
say
why
50,
don't? So then the question is, why don't you
I didn't
ask
roll
a
in a
student in
class.
line in front of you to buy it and say, I'll give you
I've thought about it.
75% of the price, right? I
I've
mean,
thought
that's
about it.
um,
Um,
the one question. I mean, if we're talking about unfairness, a college student who's 20 is going to, on average, have way higher lifetime earnings than a
mhm.
non-college student who's 20. So if you want to talk about not fair, the movie theater charging the 20-year-old non-college student more than the 20-year-old college student, that doesn't seem that. But what are you going to do? It's tough to differentiate. I mean, you can only go through so fine. You're not going to put up a menu to say, here's the 18 conditions, which you'll pay this price,
Please
and
tell
here's
us your
the
degree.
37 other
What
conditions.
degree are you getting? How
Yeah.
far in school are you?
What types of socks do you buy? If that'll determine the price you're paying. I mean, they can only go so far, and that's an easy metric. It's an interesting question. I've never, you know,
What now I'm really
gotten
curious. Maybe
upset
this
about
is
it.
a future experimental paper we can work on,
Yeah.
right? What is the threshold that would actually anger somebody about a discount, right? You give them a
Well,
dollar off, I don't really care. You give them $6, right? Like how big of a gap
so
before somebody gets mad?
the single biggest applicable form of price discrimination when I teach, and it's not even close, and it may not be nearly as it isn't nearly as relevant for your students as it is for
Mhm.
my students, and that's college tuition pricing. And there can be some differentiation. There is some differentiation
Mhm.
at public schools. I mean, there's in-state, out-of-state, and there are some scholarships.
Yeah, but
But
in-state, out-of-state's more like a subsidy type story.
yeah, private schools,
Yeah. Oh,
the price discrimination is rampant. I mean,
yeah.
they attempt, this is here I'll put in the caveat that I am not in our admissions office. Our people do wonderful work, but and I do not speak for our university.
I mean,
But I think the phrasing that
you
I
need
would
that
use
fence.
is, yeah, I think the
The
phrasing I would
values that
use
Matt
is,
is about to share are his own values and do
yeah.
not represent those of Susquehanna University or the
Well,
Sigmund Weiss
like
School of Business.
we have a list price that's very
Yeah.
high,
Yeah.
and every student gets a big scholarship.
Mhm.
Every student gets we're very generous financial aid, and it's our mission to we have like 30% Pell eligible students, which I like because these are, to me, this is helping students achieve the American dream. These are lower income students, and they graduate, they're going to have a much better life. This is awesome. But there's different prices for different students, and I think colleges, I think Susquehanna gives such good aid. We're far less blatant than most.
Mhm.
But there are many universities where it's really, really blatant, almost first degree price discrimination, where
Yeah.
they figure out what's the most we can charge this person and let's charge them that. And that's it's an interesting thing. And our students, they know this. They know different students are paying different prices. And so I talk about that, and that helps them internalize and get a sense of, maybe it's not quite first degree price discrimination, but they have a sense of what first degree
Yeah.
price discrimination is. So
Well, that's where I think learning the hurdle method today was really cool. And I'm really excited to teach it to them tomorrow. Largely because I started talking about like we really can't have a menu of prices. It's just nobody walks into a store and says, I can't wait to pay. No student walks up and tells Susquehanna, I can't wait to give you $40,675. So like we can't get
where
perfect.
did you get that number from?
I'm just making it up.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'm pretty certain that's not our price. So.
No, but that's their willingness to pay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe that's their willingness, or nobody walks in and shares their willingness to pay. And so like, I like to talk about this sort of like, here's perfect price discrimination. Like, what if we really could do it? And then this sort of backing up and saying, okay, how many price levels can we have? And I've always just done it theoretically with a graph, and I'm like, oh, we can have 4 or 5 or 6 prices. But actually getting to do the math behind it was really fun. I know that I get so nerdy in class. I get so excited to show them. And you could just see the looks, like some of them are also really into it. And some of them are just like, what is wrong with this man? Why is he so excited?
They might think that, but I think students love somebody who loves what they're teaching. I think whether, yes. I mean, I know I did even, it's weird, everybody, like people listening now. And I mean, it was one of the questions that I was asked when we had a guest, like, how did you get into Broadway? I had a theater appreciation professor who loved theater. He loved it. And by the time I left that class, I liked theater more than when I came in. And so
that's what I tell my students.
Yeah.
I tell them the exact same thing. I go, I don't need you to become an econ major. I need you to not hate it. And if I can show you that it is exciting, like it's fun to learn more.
Yep. My first year teaching, I look back at what I did. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was terrible. Like, I mean, I went from grad school and I came out and, I would lecture for an hour straight probably. My reviews weren't awful. They weren't terrible. And I think part of the reason they weren't terrible is everybody could tell I loved what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And I thought this was the greatest thing ever. And eventually then I learned all sorts of, these ways. Oh yeah, maybe you talk for 15, 20 minutes and then you introduce something, and then the clips and the experience, like all of the stuff came later, but I think enthusiasm matters. But
I agree.
Any
wait, let me share one more. And then I do have pop culture. I actually have really good pop culture for this.
I'm going to have 2 pop culture, one related to what we're saying and one that's just timely. So
I really hope that we don't have the same pop culture.
Well, I have 2, so we can't have the same.
So the other thing on the pricing strategy that I really love to talk about, and this has frustrated me about textbooks. This is actually part of the reason I started to look for a new textbook. A couple years ago, my old textbook had an entire chapter on pricing strategies and all the different things that they do. So I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this episode, 2-part tariffs, which I find so fascinating. And I'll share what that is in a second. But they had come out with a new version of the book. And what they did was they took out the pricing strategies chapter and they weaved it into the monopoly chapter as just a section of the monopoly chapter. And in doing that, they also cut down the material to just talk about sort of what is pricing strategy. And I find that so disheartening because, again, monopolies aren't real. Generally, they're not real. And so I think it's important to show them real things. And it's okay I talk about monopolies, but I talk about firms becoming monopolistic and why we care. Not that there's real monopolies. So 2-part tariffs, I think, are one of them, especially to my students. I think actually one of the more relatable things for most of them. Relatable in the sense that it will frustrate them. So the different prices at the movie theaters, I don't think they generally care because they're getting the cheaper deal. But 2-part tariffs, they do pay for, and they start to recognize this sort of monopoly behavior that's happening. So a 2-part tariff sounds really complicated, but the idea is instead of a business selling you one product, they sell you 2 products and they break it into pieces, 2 parts. And then the tariff part is basically they're selling you a fixed component and then they're kind of taxing you. That's the tariff idea, but taxing you on what you purchase. And it sounds incredibly complicated, but for all of our old listeners, it's it's known as the razor blade model or the printer ink model. So a lot of us, I think, have printers, which we paid a fixed cost for, and then you are taxed on the ink that you purchase. The printer itself really relatively cheap for what it is, but the ink is ridiculously expensive
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
have monopoly power on it.
It's funny that you went there, and my first reaction on two-part tariffs was something else that I think everybody would know, and
Oh,
it's Costco and Sam's Club.
so that's a really good one. Yeah, I yes.
You pay the fee, and I think I saw this headline somewhere, and I haven't looked it up. I could Google it now, but I think most of the revenue for Costco
Yeah,
comes, they pretty much break even on all their business
yeah.
operations. But where their
And then
profits come in is they have however many millions of people paying $100 a year, and that's their profit.
yeah.
You get 7 million people paying $100 a year, and you break even on everything else, you have
Yep.
made $700 million
And the
for
goal is get as
from
many people in, basically act like a perfectly competitive
yep,
market to get them in the door and then charge them a fee. No, I love it, right? So
yep,
this is, I think this is really good for video games, right? And that's why I say I think my students actually know about this because so many of them might have like an Xbox or a PlayStation, a
yep,
fixed cost, and then they can sell you games for really expensive prices.
yeah.
I talk about like Barbie dolls and GI Joes because there's a really great Toys That Made Us that talk about how the Barbie doll itself is really cheap, but they would get parents to have to buy the clothes for all of them instead. And
Yeah,
so there's
yeah,
all these sort of really great products that are sold in pairs that are just,
yeah,
I think that's so fun to talk about.
yeah. No, I agree, and I think it's very relatable. PS5 price, I'm just Googling it right now. It's still about $600.
That's the
But
new one though, right?
the PS5, it's a few years old
Oh,
now. But they have PlayStation, I believe. I don't think they make money. Actually, no, 449 for the PS5.
yeah.
You can get higher memory for a little bit more. Uh, I think they lose money on the actual console. Not
Mhm.
much.
Yeah.
That's not profitable. But the games themselves are, I mean, how many games for those who play video games? I am a light gamer, but our kids have played video games, and if
They're like
I'm
$60 a piece.
I'm looking over towards where it is, and we have the machine which costs
Yeah.
$500, and then we have stacks of games that are PS4. When we had the PS5, we had a Wii, we have a Wii U, like we have a Switch, and the gosh, if I thought about the total amount we've actually spent on games, I'd probably get sick. But I don't know. It very well might be like
Mhm.
$4,000. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
thinking through this because at $60 a game or $50 a game or $50 a game, that's 80 games, right? Four
Mhm.
grand. I'm pretty certain we have more than 80 games, and maybe not all of them were $50,
Yeah.
um, but I don't think it's out of the realm to think that we had the purchase price on the games was in excess in it with multiple thousands. I don't know that it's hit five figures yet,
Yeah.
but
No, that's why I like price discrimination. I think hearing us talk about it, to me, so the end of my course, I have 3 lessons. I have price discrimination, game
yep,
theory, and behavioral economics. And so I
yep,
use
yep,
that as sort of here's where economists are doing sort of real things that really matter. And that sort of like, why do we care about these decisions over multiple? So the way I like to phrase it is that you just spent time doing one price. Now there's multiple prices. You
yep,
just spent time talking about one firm. What if there's multiple firms?
yeah,
And
yeah,
talking about like oligopoly, things like that.
yeah.
I love
It's
it.
fun. It's why economics. It's
It's fun.
why it is the best discipline. So
So I
okay,
have
so pop
one pop
culture.
culture.
You have one. I have two. But why don't you go with yours first? Because
Sure.
I would hate to take your one. I don't think I'm taking your one unless you have a
All right.
Broadway one. Because
No,
I
it's not a
don't.
Broadway.
Okay, then
Nope.
I'm not taking your one.
So my clip is from the show Afterlife. Have you heard of
Okay.
this? With Ricky Gervais. There's an amazing scene where he takes his nephew out to lunch. Um, and the waitress comes over and said, and what do you want to eat? And they said, 2 kids meals, please. And the waitress goes, you only have one kid. You can't order a kid's meal. And he goes, I'm not that hungry. I just want a small portion. Please give me a kid's meal. And she goes, no, we have to charge you more for it because you're not a kid. And he goes, it's a smaller plate. Why can't I have it? I don't want as much food. And she goes, we're not going to sell it to you because like it's only for kids. And he goes, okay, he'll have 2 kids meals, please. He's very hungry. And the kid's just sitting there like shocked. And she goes, and she's just like, you're going to eat that kid's meal, aren't you? And he goes, nope, he's very hungry. Please bring him 2 kids meals. I'll have a cup of coffee.
That
But
is awesome.
I love it because this is, let me give you a perk of the pandemic, right? It was not a good time, but there's some good things that came out of it. One of them was online ordering because this is me. I like eating kids meals. generally kids meals are pretty filling. Like they're usually decent portions. I don't need a lot of food. I should probably eat less. But one of the perks is you can order a kids meal on the apps for all these places and they don't know and you don't have to worry about the shame of it. And they just think I'm picking up a food for my kid versus like if I go in myself and I say, I want a kid's hamburger, they would sort of squint and go, yeah, you're ordering this for yourself. So I do now eat more kids meals than I used to in the past.
No, and my father has done this for years. And just no shame, say, hey, can I
I
get one?
need small portions. They're
Most
too
places
big.
do it. Yeah, it's not a terrible idea. You know, if you put the full value meal or the normal meal in front of me, I'll eat it all. But if you put the kids meal, I'll eat it and it'll be fine. So
I'll be
yeah,
fine.
it's actually a strategy I should probably shift to as
It's
well.
it's a good way to lose weight, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
you'll get and you can always upgrade the sodas to bigger sodas, and it's,
Yep.
you're drinking diet soda, right?
Yep.
A smaller order of fries is probably not a bad thing for us.
Yeah. And by the way, we both hit our weight goals, right? I mean, I
I'm
hit
still
mine.
under.
I might be above where I'm supposed to be, but I did lose some, which I got under the 201, which was my goal, and then I'm probably back above it now. But
I looked
but
the
I've
other
been down a little
day.
bit.
I looked the other day, and I think I'm around 10 pounds down, which was my goal.
Yeah.
But I wasn't measuring it sort of same time, same conditions. So TMI for those listeners, I was fully dressed when I was 10 pounds down. So I'm trying to be consistent on weighing myself in the morning and stuff. So I think I'm probably down 12.
That's our update from the past. So no, that's a great clip. I'm gonna have to check it out. So I have two. One is on price discrimination. I don't think I've talked about this before, although you remember better what I've talked about before than I do. It's the airport song from Honeymoon in Vegas, which it's on Broadway Economics, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, I'm so much better at creating these decks now. So I have a great student for this. I'm going to give my great student Caitlin, say, hey, can you make a deck? I need to re-record and just upload something much better. But it's he needs a flight, and so he asks for the flight, and they say, yes, we'll send you there. It's $8,000. And he's what? And like, don't worry, we can figure something else out. And then he figures all the other routes out that have different pricing on it. It's in about a minute and a half song. It's a really brilliant example of price discrimination that can happen to get somebody from Hawaii to Las Vegas and charging different prices to go through different airports. That probably costs the airlines more, but they know you have price difference.
Probably not that much. I mean, right? Yeah. Marginal cost has to be so close to zero.
Yeah, I guess that you're right. If they're flying that way anyway, then they're just throwing it on. And,
that's a good one.
Good point. So the other one I have, I don't normally like to go about two, but it's so timely. It's still in movie theaters. The movie Conclave.
Okay, I have not heard this.
Absolutely fantastic movie. I thought it was fantastic. And I'm thinking the other thing while I'm watching this is, oh my gosh, I've got to get this streaming and record about 15 clips on voting games. So the Conclave, it's about the election for the Pope. And oh my goodness, there's so many interesting strategic situations about the voting that they are going to be going through for to elect the next Pope within Vatican City. So I'd recommend it as a movie to anybody, and I've known my whole family loved it. Well, actually, so I think one of our five hasn't seen it, but 4 of the 5 saw it, all loved it. My parents loved it. My in-laws loved it. It's not often there's a universal loving it across all of us. So
there's some interesting reviews on it's got good Rotten Tomato scores.
Yep.
I'm looking at I'm guessing this is like a Google score review. Lots of 5, right? Lots of 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, and then a weird batch at 1s. So I'm guessing this might be some sort of anti-Catholic, not actually.
I have 2 cents. I have 2 things on potentially why, and I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil anything.
We can talk about it once we log off because I'm curious.
Yeah. There's something, but I don't want to spoil it for you though either. It's a good movie.
I'm reading some of the things on here. So,
but it's a really cool about voting games. It looks like I will be teaching. I was just talking to the department chair in economics, and I will be teaching game theory again in the fall. And my students will get to enjoy some clips from Conclave and voting game when we discuss voting games next year. So that'll be a lot of fun. But well, it's great to catch up again, and I hope refreshing beverage was tasty.
It is good. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have something probably better, hoppier when I get home.
Hoppier. My beer is empty, and
Plus,
thank you to everybody for listening. Please do leave a 5-star review and a comment. It helps out. And sometimes the comments aren't on the site, but received a very nice comment on LinkedIn from Anne. Thank you for commenting that you enjoyed our episode on The Economist to Follow
oh, good.
last time, and said she started following some new people. So that was really, it's always wonderful to hear things like that. So appreciate the people listening.
Craig reposted it, so he saw that we've heard from one of our recommendations that they noticed it.
That's
So
awesome. Thank
that was
you.
really a test. Matt and I were testing all of you. If you haven't, you either
One
don't know that we're
person
testing.
passed.
Well, you either don't know that you're being tested, or you have failed your test because you missed an episode.
Yeah. And admittedly, some people will. We're only talking 5 days after the last one came out, so we know people are busy and they may have us, and who knows? People might binge us, which honestly, the idea that anybody would binge our things is kind of crazy. And if you do it, that's actually really humbling. And thank you. But but no, we appreciate everybody who listens. It's awesome to have this time. And Jadrian, until next time, happy Thanksgiving. Cheers. Enjoy Southerns.
Cheers, Matt.
Cheers.